RubberHose is a powerful After Effects plugin for rigging and animation, and I'm going to show you how to use it to animate a walk cycle. There'll be project files to download in the description if you want to follow along using the same artwork I'm using, or you can use your own character. Also, if you decide to pick up the plugin, I have a discount link in the description. You'd also be helping to support the channel, so it's a win-win. Let's jump in. So you can either use the character that I've prepared here, and there'll be a download link in the description, or you can use your own character. If you're using your own character, you need to make sure that each of the limbs is split up into its own Illustrator layer. Here I've split up the character into hand left and right, head, neck, torso, arm right and arm left, shoe right and shoe left, leg right and leg left. Once you've done that, you can save your Illustrator file, come over to After Effects and import your Illustrator file. So I'm going to click in my project panel here and press Ctrl I, and I'm going to click my character file and import as composition retain layer sizes. Now it's imported a pre-comp of my character, and if I go in here, we have a separate After Effects layer for each of the layers we created in our Illustrator file. Now there's an alternative way to do this in one click, so I'm just going to show you that as well. Create a new composition and just call it Overlord. Come back to your Illustrator file, highlight everything in the file, go to Windows and open the plugin Overlord. Make sure Split Shapes to Layers is selected, and then push selection to AE. And that is going to essentially do everything we just did, but in one click, and it imports them straight away as shape layers, which saves you an extra step if you were planning on converting your Illustrator layers to shape layers. But I thought I'd show you both ways so you have a way to do it without any plugins. Now down on the bottom left here, you can toggle between frames and regular time. Yours is probably on time like this, so if it is, just Control and click and it should switch to frames. Next we're going to come back to our composition settings here because we didn't set those up properly. Let's change to a frame rate of 30 and a frame duration of 40 frames and press OK. Now I've got my RubberHose 3 panel open here on the right. I'll just make it a little bigger for you. If you've just installed the plugin, you can open it by going to Window, Extensions, RubberHose 3, and then you can dock it wherever you want on your interface. Next we're going to recreate our limbs as close to our artwork as we can. Let's come over to our RubberHose panel here and let's click New RubberHose and let's set it to shoulder and wrist, and let's call this arm right and press OK. Now to make things a bit clearer for us, we're going to select all of our Illustrator layers and let's shy them by clicking this icon here, and we can click this button here which will hide all the shied layers, and now we're not overwhelmed with layers here. So here's our hose and we're going to try and recreate the arm. So let's drag the shoulder up to where the shoulder is and the wrist up to where the wrist is. And you can see the bend is completely wrong here, but if you select our wrist, we have some options here we can change. The direction, we can slide until it matches the direction of our arm. So now it's time to style the limb. Now RubberHose has a bunch of style presets under this style tab. So you can double click one to see how it looks. Let's have a look at a few. Some pretty cool ones in there. However, none of these really match our artwork, so we're going to come back to the basic hose. Let's select our hose and we're going to style it manually. Let's select our hose and let's change the stroke color to our skin color and press OK. We also want to make the stroke slightly thicker, so select it and let's up the stroke width to around 45. Now we need to add the sleeve. So to do this, we're going to twirl down our arm layer, open style, and here we have our basic hose. Let's press enter and rename this to arm. Now let's press Ctrl D to duplicate arm and let's call this sleeve. Let's twirl sleeve down and change the stroke color on the sleeve to white. Press OK. Now we only want the sleeve to be halfway up the arm. So let's press add here and let's add a trim paths and twirl that down and bring the end back to around where the elbow is. We don't want this circular cap, so let's come to the stroke and choose butt cap instead of round cap. But you can see something's going on here with our shoulder. We'll fix that in a minute. First, let's increase the stroke width on the sleeve so that it sticks out a little bit. Alright, now we can try and deal with the shoulder. We're going to duplicate our sleeve by selecting it, pressing Ctrl D. Let's rename this to shoulder. Twirl this down and change the end of the trim path to 1% and change the cap back to round cap. And if we disable the sleeve and the arm, we can see what we've done here. We've just created a circle here for the shoulder. Let's re-enable the sleeve and the arm. We might now have to reposition this shoulder to about here. But if we move our arm around, it's now looking pretty similar to our artwork. It's getting a little bit hard to see what is our artwork and what is the rubber hose. So let's create a solid by right-clicking, new solid. Let's just make it black. Press OK. I'm just going to unshine my layers and I'm going to put the solid between my rubber hose and my artwork just so I can see what is my rubber hose and what is the underlying artwork, and I'll reshy everything. Now we're not going to attach the hand yet. What we will instead do is duplicate our arm. So if we just click any of these 3 layers for our arm and click the Manage tab and press Duplicate. Let's name this arm L and press OK. And then let's drag these layers above and we should now be able to reposition the wrist and the shoulder where we want them. Next we can attach the hands. So let's unshy our artwork layers again. So let's show our shied layers by clicking this button, find our 2 hands here. Let's bring them above our black solid and let's parent them to the relevant wrist. So hand L we can parent to arm L wrist, and hand R we can parent to arm R wrist. Now if we move this wrist, we can see the hand moves with it, and it's looking a little bit funky here. We'll fix that later on, but we can try to reposition the artwork a little bit. I think this one's okay. So those are the arms done. Let's now move on to the legs. I'm going to shy our layers again. Now, instead of creating a new hose, because we already added the sleeve and the shoulder to our arm hoses, I know we're going to need to do this again for the sock on the leg. So instead of creating a new leg hose, I'm going to just duplicate our arm again and we will rename it to a leg. So let's click arm L, duplicate, leg L, and I'll bring these above. Maybe let's have a new color for the legs so that we can easily tell the difference. Green. Let's rename these tags from wrist to ankle and from shoulder to hip, just so it's very clear. I'm going to drag our ankle down to where the ankle is and our hip to where the hip is. And you can see this leg is very stretched. So we will increase the hose length until it bends. You can see it's bending the wrong way, so I'm also going to change the direction until it matches. Now let's twirl down our leg layer, open contents, style. Let's rename shoulder to hip, sleeve to trouser, and arm to leg. Let's change the trim paths on our trouser so that the trouser comes further down the leg. I'm going to grab the red color that I need from my Illustrator file and I will change the stroke color to the hex code. Same for the hip. And the leg is actually a sock, so I'm going to just rename that to sock. You never actually see the leg. And let's change the sock to a white fill. And we can see that our trouser is a bit thicker. So let's change the stroke width to something a bit higher. Yeah, it's about 100. And then we need to do the same for the hip. Set it to 100. Now we will duplicate this leg by pressing duplicate, change it to leg R, press OK, drag that above, reposition the hip and ankle, and let's recolor our trouser. Now we can see that in our image, this front leg is fully extended here, but both legs need to be the same hose length, so we're going to need to compromise here. I'm just going to lower the hose length a little bit here to about 585, and I'll set that as well on the other leg. and we can always tweak these values later when we're animating. Now we're going to parent the shoes to the ankles, so I'm going to show all our shied layers again, find our shoes here, bring them above our black solid. I'll parent shoe right to leg right ankle, and shoe left to leg left ankle. And now if we move our ankle, we can see the shoe moves with it. Next, let's add the rest of our artwork. I'm actually going to remove this black solid now because we don't really need it. I forgot to name this layer at the bottom. It's just the background, so I'm going to call it BG, and I'll just lock that. Let's unshy everything other than the background, and then I can just shy the background, so that's one less layer to deal with. Let's parent the neck to the torso, parent the head to the neck, parent the shoulders and the hips all to the torso. Now that we have our arms and legs set up as hoses, we can delete the leg left, leg right, arm right and arm left layers. We can bring the torso up above our leg layers. The right arm should be behind everything, and the left arm should be above everything. Now the hip here is sticking out a little bit, so we're just going to reposition this a tad, something like that. And now that we've parented everything together, if we move our torso, everything else in the body moves with it. We don't want the hands to stay where they are when the torso moves. So let's grab our two wrists and parent them to the torso as well. And now when the torso moves, the wrists also move. And you can just play around and pose your character now to get comfortable with it. Although I've moved the right arm behind all the other layers, which is correct, we do want to still be able to see the controllers. So I'll grab the controllers and bring them to the top. And I'll do the same with all the other controllers. I'll just bring them above the artwork layers. So now our character is successfully rigged. The next step is going to be to animate it. The first thing we're going to animate is the legs. So I'm going to hide all the layers we don't need. So let's select all our arm controllers and click shy and uncheck visible. Let's select our arm rubber hoses and uncheck visible. It's just going to be easier that way. Do the same with the hands. I'll shy those as well. Shy the arms. Shy the head and the neck, but keep them visible. And if we click the hide all shy layers, we should be left with this. Let's also shy the two leg artwork layers. We don't need those. So we just have the two shoes, the torso, and the leg controllers. And in fact, we don't even need the hip controllers right now, so we can shy those as well. We haven't deleted these layers, they're still there, we just can't see them because we've clicked this shy button. Now, in order to animate, I found this reference image by Richard Williams, who is the author of The Animator's Survival Guide, and I thought we'd use this as a reference for our walk cycle. I'll put a link to where you can find this image in the description. You can download it, import it to your project, and then if you click on it, it'll open a panel like this. You can drag this anywhere in your scene to just dock it, and you can keep it there as a reference image. Let's leave it here, and this is the first pose we want to achieve, and right now we're just looking at the legs. Let's try and mimic this pose at frame 0. First thing we're going to do is we're also going to need to draw a floor. So let's just draw a straight line like this with black 2-pixel stroke. Move it down a little bit. Oh, and one thing I did off recording is that I came into my composition settings and I slightly increased the width and height of the composition to 1200 so that we have a bit more room to work with. And then I'm just going to grab these controllers and I'm going to use the arrow keys so that I can move it more precisely until I feel like it's in position. Same with the back leg. Then I'm just going to grab the shoes and change the rotation slightly. And I'm just going to drag the shoe artwork above the legs. To do that, I'm just going to need to show the shied layers again, drag the shoes above the leg, and then I can hide them again. I will also just reposition this shoe. I can see what's gone wrong here. The anchor point of the shoe is not correct. So when we rotate the shoe, it's rotating around the center of the shoe. If we press Y or click the pan behind tool up here, we can move the anchor point to about here, which is where we want to rotate from. And then let's reposition them by pressing V and then just moving it back into position. So here's our first pose. Let's grab our two shoes and press R and add rotation keyframes at frame 0. Let's grab our two ankles, press P, and it's given us position keyframes but split into X and Y. For our needs, this is a bit overkill, so I'm actually going to right click and uncheck separate dimensions, just so we have a few less keyframes to deal with. So now we have one position property with both X and Y. And let's add position keyframes for both of these controllers. I can also see from this reference image that the character is leaning slightly forward. So let's select our torso, press R, and let's just increase the rotation a little bit, and maybe just move the position a little bit to the right. That looks a little bit more natural. Now let's also add a line. So if we duplicate our ground line, let's call this one floor, Control D, and call this one top. Hold shift and up arrow just to move it up, and put it where the top of the head is. And we're just going to use this as a reference. And we can then lock the floor and the top line and shy them both. Now let's come to our second pose, which is this down pose. Let's put a position at frame 0 for the current position of the torso. Let's keyframe the current position of the torso at frame 0. And we're going to be adding keyframes every 5 frames. So let's move to frame 5 and let's move the Y position of the torso down. Maybe to about there. Maybe that was overkill. Let's bring it back up a little bit. So we just have this movement. Now the foot should now be flat on the ground, so we can alter this rotation until the shoe is flat, like that. And then if you need to change the position of this ankle controller at all, you can. I'm just going to bring it down till it touches the floor. And the back foot compared to last frame is more rotated, so I'm going to add a rotation keyframe till about there. And again, the ankle can then come down until the shoe is touching the ground. Next pose. Let's come to frame 10. I'm now going to move the position till it's all the way back here. About there. Let's grab the torso and bring it up. You can see it's past the line here in this reference image. Let's say about here. And this foot has come to around here. And the rotation of the shoe looks like it's about the same. I'll change it by a couple of points. And the other shoe remains flat. I will just copy and paste the last keyframe. Let's come to frame 15. Let's do the torso. The torso comes up even more till it's way above the line. And then we bring this ankle back even more. I think on frame 10 I went a bit overkill. Let's on frame 10 move it slightly more to the front, and then frame 15 let's move it back to around there, and then let's move it up back a bit more, I'd say about there, and then we will rotate the shoe, seems to be about this angle. So then let's move the controller again until the shoe is touching the ground and the leg is fully extended. I can see a slight problem here. The left shoe should be behind the right leg. So let's just unhide our shied layers again and fix this. I'm going to bring it behind like that. That's better. And let's reshy. Now let's bring this foot forward a bit and down a little bit. And let's rotate the foot till it's about there. So far we have this. Let's go to the next frame. Let's go to frame 20. And this frame is actually a mirror opposite of the first frame. It's just that the other leg is forward. So what we can do is come to frame 0, copy the position here, come to frame 20, select the other leg's controller and paste it. Let's do the same with the torso, copy and paste the first frame, paste it. Now let's rotate the shoe till about there. Again, I'll copy this position, the first position from the other ankle, paste it to the other ankle, rotate the shoe, and just adjust it slightly. So because we know that the animation now just repeats but with the other leg forward instead, what we can do is we can copy and paste the last 4 keyframes from the left ankle and paste them at frame 25 to the right leg. So I can just box select, Control C, select my other ankle, come to frame 25 and paste. And we can do the same for the other leg. So let's highlight these 4 keyframes from the right leg, select the left leg, and paste. And we're just going to quickly come into the composition settings and change the duration to 41 rather than 40, just so we can have one more frame to check things. But I also need to just show our layers again. Control A to highlight everything. Just drag it out by one frame. Do the same with the two lines that we drew. So now I can press Shift Home and Shift End and view the start and the end frame to compare them. So now we have this, but the shoes are a bit out of whack. So we're going to manually add some keyframes here. For some reason these two keyframes don't match, so I'm just going to copy this one, and then now they match. So here the shoes look fine. Let's go to the next frame. Here the shoes look fine, so I'm just going to copy and paste the last keyframes for the shoe rotation. Let's come to frame 30, and I think this shoe needs to be flat. So I'm just going to change the rotation here, and it needs to be on the ground. So I'm going to tweak the position. Ooh. And the other shoe needs to be rotated kind of like this. Let's come to frame 35, and the feet are supposed to look like this. So let's change the rotation to something like that, and this one to something like that. Final frame 40 should be exactly the same as frame 0, so I'm just going to go through, highlight the start keyframes for everything, and paste them. Just press Shift Home and Shift End. It should look identical. Now let's see what this looks like. Okay, it's coming along. We haven't added that many keyframes for the torso, so let's have a look. I think they can repeat after frame 20, so I'm going to highlight the 4 frames here, paste them. Now let's have a play. Looking better. And there's a bit of a pause at the end of each cycle. That's just because I added an extra frame here, but we can come to frame 39, press N, and it should look better now. Let's add a little bit of sway into the head. So let's unshy our layers. Here's our head and neck. Let's unshy them, and then shy everything again. And we can see our head and neck. Let's move the anchor points by pressing Y, and then move it down to about there. And let's add just a little bit of sway in the neck. So I pressed R to add a rotation keyframe on frame 0. Let's just come all the way to frame 20 and maybe loll the head back a little bit. Oops, that was frame 15. Let's drag it forward to frame 20. We've moved the head back a little bit, and let's just copy and paste the start keyframe to frame 40. So we just added a little bit of head movement in there. Now let's animate the arms. Let's unshy everything again so we can see all of our layers. And let's enable the visibility on the arms now. And the arms are just going to swing back and forth. So let's grab our 2 wrist controllers. Again, let's remove separate dimensions so we just have one property for position. Let's add a position keyframe at frame 0. Before we animate these arms, I just want to correct one thing from earlier. Let's come to the effects on one of the wrists, and here where I've set direction to -27%, let's actually set it to -100%, and then let's adjust the hose length to bring it back to the position in which it was. And I'm going to do the same for the other wrist. So I'm going to select both of the wrist controllers, press P to open position, add a position keyframe at frame 0, come to frame 20, and let's swing this arm back and swing this arm forwards. And I actually want you to hide the hands for now because they're going to distract you. And let's copy the frame that is at frame 0 and paste it at frame 40 for both of the arms. So we have something really simple like this. They want to have a bit more of a swing to them, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to come up to the pen tool here, select convert vertex, and we can actually drag out like this to make a kind of arc. And we'll do that again. And now let's click the other arm and do the same thing. We'll also highlight these frames and press F9 to add a little bit of easing. Now we have this. Now we can re-enable our hands, and we can animate their rotation. So let's add a rotation keyframe at frame 0 for both of them. So let's select the hands, and we're going to change the anchor point again to about here, both of the hands, so we can rotate them properly. Then let's add a rotation keyframe at frame 0, come to frame 20, let's change the rotation till they look okay. And we also need to change the layering here so that this hand is above the leg. And let's just copy and paste the starting frames to the end. And then we have something more like this. The hands look a little strange. I might just also keyframe their position a little bit, because even with moving the anchor point, they just look a little bit odd on this center frame. Maybe that will help. This hand should rotate forward a little bit like this. And the same with the other hand at this point. Maybe it's a little bit more rotated forward. And then reposition it a little bit, maybe like that. And now let's add a bit more easing. We will add some easing to the torso. So highlight all of these keyframes, press F9, add it to the rotation of the shoes, and the bobbing of the neck and the head. So let's hide our top line. Let's come over to our RubberHose panel and press toggle controllers. And now we can view our animation. I've noticed one thing that's wrong, which is that this foot, between 20 and 25 frames, it's supposed to come down flat on the floor, but it's not. So let's change that. Let's just animate the rotation here until it's down on the ground. And we might have to just tweak the ankle keyframe like that. Now let's watch. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Let me know in the comments how you got on, and send me your animations on Twitter and Instagram at HolmesMotion. I'd love to see them. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and enable those notifications so you never miss a tutorial. See you in the next one.